A game that captured my attention here at the mix at GDC was the Forest song. And why don't you introduce us to it? What kind of game is it, and what's the story here?
It's a story about like people from the Police region. Probably not that many people heard about this region, but that's one of the biggest forests in the European continent. And that's actually the place where it was one of the biggest disasters happened, Chernobyl. That's a very interesting place because people who live there, they built this interconnected relationship with the forest because they live for so many years in the forest. And that we traveled there, and it kept like I was like very excited. Like we heard so many interesting stories from them. A lot of very rich mythology. I personally from Ukraine myself, but I kind of like not very familiar with that area because I live in the other part. But we met with people that basically led us to that production.
It is sort of an interesting part of Europe, but it's sort of maybe Western Europe hasn't learned so much about it, and maybe, you know, because it is close to where I live in Sweden. Geographically, it's close, but I haven't heard that much about it.
It is. It's like quite honestly, people who live really, really close, they don't know much, and part of it is because we really don't want it to learn that much. Like we really like live the whole now life. Like we're not really thinking about what's your neighbors do. And part of our mission is actually to share the stories with the rest of the world, with the gamers, with other people, because the stories that we're about to tell is very, very relevant for these days. It's the basics of it. This stories warns you about like circumstances, like if you really not respect the nature, what's going to happen to you. And in real life, that's actually happened in this region with the Chernobyl disaster. In this story will have very similar event, and the player will be challenged to go and rebuild this connection between people and the forest, and in between the supernatural world.
Because you do have sort of a particular approach, if you will, to this sort of thing. You were also involved with Never Alone, and now this game. You sort of a little bit of a different approach than perhaps what a lot of game development studios is doing to sort of the subject matter.
We really believe that games, especially cultural games, have to be done in a tight collaborations. The previous game, Never Alone, we really worked with the culture together. It wasn't like us making the game and they were kind of on the side. They were part of the team, and we're doing and trying to replicate basically exactly the same thing what we did there. First, before we actually have the design, first thing we do, we travel into the region, we speak to people, we're learning from them, we're hearing the story, and then we go to the design and really trying to take all the story and bring it to the games.
How do you sort of build mechanics based on that sort of myth? And what kind of approach have you taken to that? And it's sort of like a puzzle game, if you will, that you're creating here.
It's an interesting question, but I think that's what art is like of the game design, because it's a certain story is better to be told with this certain genre. We believe this kind of cultural game, the first-person game, the adventure game, that allow you to live and be like, that's the most immersive in our opinion kind of genre, to relive and live with these people and learn from them. You will hear their conversation, you will know what their normal life is. So that's basically the answer. Like overall, it's not like that. It's like we're thinking and changing like all normal developments, but until we'll find the right appropriate genre and the way of the mechanics to tell this story.
Of course, the art style is also very particular. Is the art style sort of influenced by any sort of part of that culture, of the art that has been there?
A lot of things. Of course, like it's a forest. It's a beautiful forest, and in terms of
going with a little bit stylized.
Yeah, we're going a little bit stylized. We wanted to make it kind of a special tale, like very beautiful. We don't want to bring this kind of a heavy. That's
how I would feel that forest can be a little bit.
Some of the events, like you're looking like what we're showing here in the demo, it's actually the middle of the game. At the very beginning of the game, it's going to be pretty sad because you will see, it's going to be a spoiler, but you will see the forest on fire, and the village on fire. So it will be very sad I would say the palette similar to Never Alone, where is everything kind of gray and blue. But after that, when you resolve sort of puzzles, you'll be able to see more beautiful environments. So it's with the style, we're also picking the style that we think also the most appropriate, that will tell the story the best. And it's will kind of the character at the beginning very sad, so the environment would be kind of gloomy and sad. Like when you go towards when he's young, the environment will be bright, kind of like how you see it when you're young. Everything is very happy.
You are doing this sort of reversed story time sequence in this game. You start out when things have gone by, and then you have to sort of go back and fix things to make it the place it ought to be.
Yeah, we think that's very unique kind of for us, because it's an adaptation of the real story, first of all. And this story ends when the player goes and basically ready to die, and he is dying. We decided why not to give him a hope and actually give him a last chance, relive the stuff and fix his mistakes. Our code was saying, like, what if I will have another chance and be able to go back and choose another path, different path? So we think that's kind of will inspire people. It's never too late. You can always, like, even like you did something really bad, you can always fix it. And you always have this opportunity if you really want to. So that's why we decided to do that way.
I understand you're fairly early on in development, but can you tell us a little bit where you're at and what platforms you're aiming for and when you might be done, etc., etc.?
It's hard for us to answer, like, when it's going to be out, like, because it's a game developer. Sometimes you want it to be like it's 1.5 years or 2, but I would say optimistic prognosis is probably 2 years at least for the development of this game. And about platforms, we don't know yet. That's something that we'll answer later.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much.